The Hustleshare podcast is sponsored by OneCFO, the Philippines' leading fractional CFO services provider for startups, scale-ups, and SMEs. Experience the power of tech-enabled, efficient, affordable, and expert-led fractional CFO services. Let OneCFO handle your finances so you can focus on growing your business. Book your free CFO consultation today.
We don't yet have role models who come from outside of these backgrounds, right?
Yes. Local heroes.
Yeah. And the people who have who exited their business and they put it back to support. Maybe because we are still a young ecosystem. So I think it also could be a symptom of that. But yes, so it's very hard for us to now go to a Bukidnon and then tell that entrepreneur, yes, you can be this international thing, where they don't have anyone who comes from a similar background to look up to.
Welcome to Hustleshare, the podcast that features the daily grinds of unique hustlers around the world to show not our differences, but that our hustles are very much alike. Now here's your host, Ronster Baetiong.
Welcome to the latest episode of the Hustleshare podcast. It's super duper special because I've been wanting to get this girl for the longest time here in this show. And I remember vividly, I don't even remember where it was, but I remember seeing you, Priya. I was like, yo, you should be on the show, right? And it took a while. We all got busy, but big shout outs to Mariah of Villgro for letting this happen. And timing is everything because as we do this, it's obviously International Women's Month. But before I get carried away, let's welcome to the show the co-founder and CEO of Villgro Philippines, Miss Priya Thachadi. Whoop, whoop. Welcome to the show, Priya.
Wow, what a welcome. Thank you so much, Ron. Fantastic to be here. I know we've been planning this for a while, so I'm glad that we kind of are making it happen finally.
Right. And again, I'm on a mission to collect Thanos' gauntlet of all the people that fund startups here in the Philippines. But what I love about what you guys do is you have a real laser focus on women and impact. And correct me if I'm wrong, that if that is not the case. But before I get carried away again, I need to ask you the $1 million question. Priya, what's your hustle?
I love that. If it's $1 million or more, I don't know.
Billions.
Yeah, thanks so much. I think, I've always had one sort of North Star driving me, that is to create and make a difference. Mm-hmm. And, that's kind of been my path since I was very young. Mm-hmm. And I think some things that keep happening in your life lead you to a certain path. And that's kind of, what made me arrive at this place. But I think I've always been on a journey to help people make a difference. And I've just been trying different things, since I was a kid to make that happen. And I think eventually over the last sort of 7 years, becoming an entrepreneur and creating different businesses that actually create impact really has been my hustle. So I'm trying to remember life before being an entrepreneur. It's been a while.
It's a totally different lifetime, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really all encompassing, right? Setting up your own businesses. But I think my driver really is to help others. And I've kind of found my passion and my calling in helping other entrepreneurs succeed. And I have various initiatives through which I do that, one of them being Villgro Philippines.
All right. And we will be dissecting every single one of them that you're doing. But before I get carried away, I need you to buckle up real quick because we're going to have to go all the way back and understand your journey of helping others. But before you help others, I need to understand first your origin story because we're going to have to ride the Hustleshare time machine. All right. There you go. This time machine is timeless. I've had so many people go all the way back. We'd go round trip to understand the origin story. Now I want to understand, what was it like growing up? Two things I always ask is that, what was your first exposure to hustling, and who were the people that influenced you to hustle early on?
Yeah, that's a great question. Mm-hmm. So, rewinding, that is quite a going back quite a way back. The sound
we always
effect,
start at the start.
Go way back to the origins. So I grew up in a small town in India.
Which part? Let's be specific.
All right.
It's a subcontinent. It's huge.
It's huge. It's huge.
Yep.
It's I always joke with my team when I'm going between different cities that it's like going to different countries.
Correct.
So I'm from a state, or let's say equivalent of a province, called Kerala. And I come from a small town called Kayamkulam, which is, waterside, near the ocean.
Wow.
It's a small town. I grew up there. That's where all my memories are from. And I grew up in a family of grassroots politicians and activists. So by the time I came around, I kind of grew up in a scenario where every morning, even before I went to school, there would be so many people at my house. People had come to meet my dad and my uncle, both the grassroots politicians, that, as I mentioned. And so I spent every morning, actually, as soon as I woke up, I would run to this office room where, people would come and they were waiting. And I would kind of listen, chit chat with them before I went to school. And so I think that really is that fundamentally shaped my life, because listening to all of the different stories and why people were there to try and find support to solve a problem really was kind of the hustle that I saw from everyday people. And I think that has kind of driven everything about who I am, because I've had some time to reflect on this, why I'm built this way. And I think, so growing, and I also grew up in a family of lots of women. So while I had like really two strong male figures who were doing all this kind of, grassroots work and helping people in various ways. I also grew up with two sisters and a strong mom. And, that kind of was completely what influenced me. So pretty protected in that sense. But this informed kind of my whole worldview. Yeah, so that's kind of where I'm originally from. I went to boarding school when I was 8 years old.
8 years old?
Yeah.
Wow.
Because, my mom did, because we from a small town, and my parents were very certain that, they wanted to give me a quality of education that would set me up for life. So I was very privileged that way, and very grateful. So despite, and I was like the oldest person. My sisters went when they were much younger. They went when they were 6, from grade 1. I only went in grade 4 or 5.
Wait, I want to zoom in on this, because this is such an interesting origin story. So younger than 8 years old, you're already technically socially aware of what's going on. You already know how to talk to people. You know what people's problem, because people don't go to politicians just to say hi. 99% of the time they have a problem, they need help, right? And they go there to ask for help, ask for guidance or whatever, and you know how to talk to them. That comes in naturally. That's a superpower that, because if not a lot of people has the ability to actually dissect a problem and the emotion to it and be compelled to actually act on them, right?
Yeah.
And then now, as an 8-year-old, you're technically taught independence because you have to do it in a boarding school. There's a lot of people that I know that are basically taught that way very, very early on. But what happened in boarding school that allowed, or what are the things you learned in the boarding school at such a young age? I cannot imagine. I still remember I was probably in the late high school, and I'm still scared shitless whenever I leave my house, and I'm already a grown ass man, more or less. I'm more or less 18, but 8 years old. My God, I cannot even imagine.
Yeah, I know. I think it's kind of probably a different time. I think today, not so many parents want to send their children to boarding school and all that. I think my parents sacrificed that time with us. But I honestly have to say that the first year was really difficult, because I had never left home or never actually spent a day away from my mom. Being the youngest in my family, I was kind of
the baby girl,
mama's pet.
Yes.
And I was quite protected. So I think she did, she made a huge sacrifice of sending me, because it was very difficult for her. We both cried, and it was a whole dramatic scene the day that she left me at boarding school. I ran behind the car, but I was very lucky that my sisters were already there. So that was still, but we kind of crossed over for 1 year. So that helped. So I think that first year I was really sad, and I cried all the time, and I was not used to eating, I was used to a lot of pampering at home, and it was a big shock to my system and existence. But I think once I got over the first year, I think boarding school is kind of where I blossomed. Because, it is really your formative years, as a teenager. And it was still fairly kind of, a secure space, but it was, run by a boarding school run by Franciscan missionaries of Mary, and they were very, very kind of focused on letting us become sort of independent women and like really set to go out into the world and do good. I think that was kind of also like some values that we did.
Wow.
Were drilled, and I think I did well. I was really very good at sports. I was
very good. What sport?
Yeah, I played multiple sports. I played basketball, field hockey, and field and track. Right.
Oh my God, that's amazing. No, so okay, I have double respect.
I played for my district. So I think sports is where I found kind of my own leadership skills.
Yes.
And some success, failure, right? Very early on. And also kind of I think the lessons of working together, because when you're playing field
team
hockey,
sports,
for example, or basketball, any team sports, or even, even if you're doing track and it's individual, but ultimately like all of the points matter, right? Like in school sports. And, so I think it really sports, I think, is where I built a lot of my life lessons and life skills. And I think how to overcome failure, because, you can have, especially in field hockey, it's really a tough sport. And physically as well. So if you're doing really badly by the first half, then you really have like very little energy. It's not like we were like super fit or we had like amazing training or anything like that.
Right.
And I think, those losses really is kind of, because you have to kind of build yourself up every time you see somebody else shoot a goal or, get a basket. And then you have to kind of build yourself up to just say that you're still going to win, right? You have to get back up. And I think, and it's what I've loved all my life. I think, being part of that team sports, and I still, sports still give me kind of the goosebumps and make me feel happy. It's a rush for sure.
I totally agree. I also played varsity basketball in high school, and a lot of how I learned several things that are foundational into what I do, because two things. Business is very, very similar to team sports. It is almost identical, because it's never going to be easy. It's a grind, and you're going to need a lot of people to help you get a chance to win. There's no guarantees. Sometimes you're going to be losing 9% of the time, but if you are really persistent about achieving the goal, which is to win, then you'll respect the grind, because it's the grind, the training, the discipline, the pushing yourself to the limit, all of that encompasses into making you a better person. And if I wasn't, and basketball was my sport, so we have a common denominator there. That, we all have roles to play, and you cannot win alone, because majority of the time when you actually are individualistic and be selfish, not say you're just stat padding and you just want to look good in front of everyone to the detriment of your team, majority of the time that's when you lose. But it's the respect to the hustle, but more importantly, the grit. It taught me grit. I have a longer resistance towards adversity, because I always just look back, man, I've done harder in life, and your mental toughness is literally there. Like, you cannot rattle me. Right? Even if I'm physically exhausted, it will take a lot to get me over to just quit. And I don't know what quitting means. And I brought that onto business, because I knew at the end of the day that I needed to surround myself with people that help me to become better and hold me accountable. And that's what I want to find out. So you had that foundational shift. How did that translate to say college and early parts of your business, Priya? Talk to me about how you were able to incorporate the sports learnings into the next parts of your career.
Yeah, I think the boarding school really gave me that, the leadership in sports, but I was also the head girl of my school, which is, kind of a democratically like voted process, which also means that people saw something in me maybe that I didn't see in myself. So boarding school is a great experience, but going to college was a little bit tough, because it's just, going from a school of like 300 or like 200 people into college, which also was an all women's college, highly competitive. But it was a real world, right? It was like far more competitive. Like, people are no longer like, you're not in the protected environment. You kind of meet all kinds of people, and people are tough. Everybody's kind of navigating as young adults. So that was a bit of a tough experience. Again, my first year, I was really quite sad because, you kind of have to start over, right? You have to make new friends. You have to kind of, I went to
New
like a big
environment.
city. I studied in Bangalore, which, the IT boom and all that was just starting.
Yep.
So it was kind of a city that was changing, but it was also my first big city that I lived in.
What did you take up?
So I studied finance and business, so accounting and financial accounting and stuff, which I hated throughout. Funnily, I really wanted to be a lawyer after 11 and 12, but there's a whole other story. But whatever, for whatever reason, I didn't get into the law school that I wanted, so I kind of just, a friend of mine just applied to whatever course that she was applying to.
Okay.
Because she was like, oh, we'll just do this as a backup because you're going to be a lawyer. And then that didn't happen. And so I just continued on. So I have to say, I didn't really focus that much in college, my undergraduate degree, because, I was not that interested. I was really interested in all the extracurriculars, and I was part of the student government and things like that. So that was like more fun. And I really had a great time. I made really amazing friends. And I really had a fantastic time, in a big city for the first time, and going to parties and like just really hanging out with friends. Yep. I think it really foundationally, friendship is kind of what I took away from college. I did study a little bit as needed. But when I graduated, I thought I'm never going to look at, I kind of came out a bit of an activist more than, even though I studied business and finance and accounting. I told myself I'm never going to look at those things ever again. And so I actually...
So here you are being a CEO.
Yeah. So I decided to become a journalist, actually. So I was like, let's forget about these 3 years and I'm going to study something I'm interested in, which was journalism.
Okay.
And then I worked my first job was at a startup newspaper.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was kind of...
So for you kids, back then in our generation, people still read their news in a piece of paper called a broadsheet. There you go.
Yeah, that's right. Yep. So this was kind of like an innovative, startup.
Okay.
It was actually kind of, a few very senior journalists had come together and decided to start a very serious paper, which is...
And this is still in India?
This is in India. It doesn't exist anymore because like many startups, it didn't really get product market fit. I mean, these are terms that I know now. But, that it's a very interesting job because we also had to sell the subscriptions because it was a weekly. And then we also wrote the stories because we were all like, it's the hustle, right? You have to wear all different hats.
Yep.
All of this I didn't know until now that I know the startup lingo or looking back. But at that time, we just did whatever, your boss asked you to do, which was like, okay, also sell some subscriptions and figure out the circulation in all the newspaper stands. I don't know. They don't exist anymore, I guess, newspaper stands. And we were also trying to be sort of digital way before, social media and Facebook and all was just starting. So we were trying to be digital, but, by the time we got to the end of 2 years, I knew that it was probably not going to last because, they didn't, the investors had put in enough money. And so I decided to move abroad and study, pursue a master's. By then, I realized that I should probably go back to my passion, which is public policy and maybe working with government. So I decided to pursue that. So I moved to the UK for a few years. And I studied, international relations and development because I knew that social development, politics, policy is kind of what I'm interested in. So might as well go and, I just really needed something to do beyond this job.
Got it.
Which
and
I really
going back to your roots too, because you got that from your dad very early on.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I just thought that that's what I knew and, why to run away from your passion is kind of what I thought. So I did that for a few years. Unfortunately, I graduated in the financial crash. In fact, the same week
my God.
September
Yikes.
Of that year, 2018, when the crash was happening. So kind of the life I had seen for myself, which was like most people who go to study abroad, live there for 2 years, work there. That didn't pan out because like me, many other graduates from top schools were roaming around London trying to find any job, even at a Tesco, even at a supermarket. It was very, very hard.
Yeah.
It was a very depressing time for the economy and, globally, as we know now. So after struggling there for a few years and thinking, oh my God, if I want to work in development, I should just go back to my own country. So I
Did you
went
take
back.
some odd jobs while you were trying to make
I
it?
did, of course. I
What were
worked.
these odd jobs?
Yeah, I did. Even when I was a student, I did many jobs.
Okay.
I worked at a supermarket on campus,
Wow.
filling the shelves. I did some waitressing, which I was terrible at because I'm not very good. I could only handle like 2 plates at a time, and other people were doing like 6.
Oh, man.
So I was terrible. But, over Christmas, they were really desperate for people, more
Right,
waiting
right.
up. I did some waiting tables. I did some, support for elders, taking, elders to like hospitals.
Wow.
I worked as a translator. So any job that I think it really taught me like the value of doing any work. And that's why like I sometimes even you'll never see me ever raising my voice, at a store, at an assistant or, in a supermarket or anything, because I have huge respect for people who are standing on their feet and, providing a service.
And it keeps you grounded for life, because at the end of the day, no matter how high you get, you would always go back to like, hey, you know what? I was just like you before, right?
Absolutely.
Similarly,
Absolutely.
I had jobs like, man, what did I do before? Like I was helping my mom in the sari store that we had. Every house had a sari store technically.
Correct.
Little things like that. I sold makeup because I lost three
wow.
makeup. Like I didn't know. I cannot demo at makeup because I'm not going to put that on my face, but I sold lipsticks, lip, whatever stuff, foundation. I sold that. So it really kept me humbled. And when you experience odd jobs, there's no job too big for you.
Absolutely.
And especially if you're going to be a CEO, at the start, when you're a 0 to 1 founder, the C in CEO is not chief executive, it's chief everything officer. You're going to have to do everything literally. And if you have that ego, that's your number one enemy if you're going to be a 0 to 1 founder.
Yeah. I think the worst job that I ever had was at the end of like the student year, one of the jobs was cleaning out the residences of the undergraduate students.
Oh, man.
And I can tell you, cleaning up the garbage of teenagers is probably the worst thing that you'll ever have to do.
Nasty.
I think that was like, oh my God, that was kind of like a flash of my life. Like, okay, I need to, do something.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a tough one. But the rest of it, honestly, was hard work. But, it was something that I enjoyed because, again, you kind of meet a lot of people. Mm-hmm. So I think, so that kind of brought me back to India. So I realized that why struggle in like somebody's country and like you're not getting a job. It was a tough time for the world anyway. Mm-hmm. So I did go back and I did get a job in public policy. I worked with a really wonderful non-partisan organization in Delhi that worked with members of parliament. And I did that for a few years and I got an opportunity to run what we call like a fellowship, bringing young people into politics and kind of pairing them to work with members of parliament. So that was a fun thing. So that again, like, we had like 50 fellows. It was, again, people management in my like, 20s, which was great.
Yep. Which you already had way early. So
I know.
This comes in naturally.
Kind of like using all this natural skills that you developed along the way in life. But I actually just got headhunted into working in the social entrepreneurship space because Villgro is originally a brand out of India.
Okay.
And they were running a fellowship similarly of bringing young people into the social impact space. And there was like no other fellowship. So they probably just Googled fellowships and there was only another one in India, which was managed by me. So that's how they found me. And I knew nothing. And I had never thought about going back into like anything to do with business because I was very much on this like activism.
You buried that already.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. The social like policy kind of space is where I was kind of set.
Yep.
But I think like, this job was not very high paying. And then, my boyfriend at that time said like, this job is going to pay you so much more. Like, even if you don't like social entrepreneurship, like you should really take it. And he's like, it's the same as like it's what you want to do. It's kind of has impact and it also has business. So just do it. So that's kind of actually I was going to say no to that job, but then he kind of really pushed me. Well, now my husband, so maybe
there you go. Shout out.
And then I did take the job, and then I kind of discovered, this whole world of entrepreneurship, and kind of realized, I like actually even started my career with the startup newspaper as it was, or a media platform, and all of these other things that along the way that I had exposure to. My family had set up, multiple cooperatives, which, I had a chance, along the way in my childhood that I had a chance of seeing. So it kind of seemed like the sector or the space that I was kind of searching for, which, the frustration about, I think, generally for me personally in working in policy was that it was very like top down and it takes so long. But when it happens, I think it's the most powerful thing, right? Because the kind of scale that good policy can have and the impact is huge. But I think in my 20s, I was quite impatient and I was like, it's taking too long. I need something else. But I felt it was a bit more bottom up. And I think entrepreneurship kind of, and especially social entrepreneurship was kind of a fascinating world, which kind of blended entrepreneurship and the business side as well as impact. So that was kind of my accidental entry into this space.
All right. Now let's take our first break. And when we come back, after you got accidentally entered into the space, of course, you have been almost more than 10 years into this journey. And that's where we're going to be doing a deep dive on. But let's talk about that more after the break. Hey, hustlers, are you a busy entrepreneur juggling a ton of tasks while trying to keep your finances in check? Thinking of raising money from investors or lenders but have no idea how to start? Well, you are not alone. Managing business finances is tough. But don't worry, I got something for you. Introducing OneCFO, the leading fractional CFO service and technology provider for SMEs, startups, and scale-ups in the Philippines. Whether you need help with financial management, fundraising strategy, or scaling up operations, their team of top-tier CFOs and their game-changing CFO tech platform have got you covered. And they're legit because I've heard about them from a lot of YC startups actually that got founded in the Philippines, because they've helped a ton of VC-backed startups, scale-ups, and some of the best SMEs in the country reach new heights. OneCFO is your strategic financial partner, providing the insights, guidance, and the tools you need to make smarter decisions and drive growth. Plus, they offer personalized support tailored to what your business needs, no matter the size. And what's the best part? It won't break the bank. OneCFO services are affordable and accessible to businesses of all sizes. So if you're ready to level up your business and finances, what are you waiting for? Schedule a free CFO consultation with OneCFO. Visit onecfoph.co today. That's onecfoph.co today to get your free CFO consultation. And we're back from the break. We are still with Priya Thachadi, then told us the amazing origin story that she did from sports to politics to doing a lot of legislative research, but the one thing that she hated still got her back, which is business, right? Full circle. And I resonate with you. I remember I wanted to be in college, wanted to go to tourism, but I didn't pass because my average conduct grade was a failure. So I ended up in commerce. I hated math. So when you talk the way my very naive brain before would connotate business and math at the same thing. And I didn't realize that my superpowers were actually perfect for business. So I'm obviously extroverted. I know how to work with people. I have the charm. I know how to do that. And when I learned oh my God, I'm actually tailored for this. And I took up entrepreneurship. The rest was history. And I literally just ended up where I was supposed to be anyway. But with business, again, you had that early exposure. You took that up in college and whatnot. And now you got yourself here in Villgro, let's just say accidentally, because it paid well. But I'm pretty sure there was a point there where you actually felt that, hey, this is where I'm supposed to be. Because you wouldn't be doing this for almost 12, 13 years, Priya, if you did not feel that way very early on. Walk me through what was the first few months or years in Villgro, and when did you feel that, hey, you know what, I'm actually where I'm supposed to be?
Yeah. So Villgro in India, just as a backstory, was started by a gentleman called Paul Basil, who also kind of came from, he worked at one of the largest milk cooperatives in the world called Amul, also from India. And, so he kind of came from the agri space. And, he had started it he was way ahead of the curve, right? Even before all the startup lingo came along and before social entrepreneurship itself became like a more popularized concept. He had the foresight to set up, an enabling organization to support innovators. Originally starting kind of from the village level or like the grassroots level in rural areas and trying to see. So that was kind of his journey. So by the time I kind of joined the organization, it was already reasonably well established. I think we were already kind of 10 years in. And so we kind of really just at a really interesting point in my career and, what I've learned is that kind of learning about this space and being able to understand. And it was really quite inspiring, just learning about the entrepreneurs, especially the social entrepreneurs. Because of the role that I was hired to do, I got to do a lot of immersion visits and like meeting innovators on the ground.
Yep.
We travel to different villages in India. Villages mean rural areas.
It's the same here.
Yeah, I remember coming to the Philippines first time and somebody was like saying, I will sell, I went to a pitch and somebody said, I'll sell these drinks in the village. And I was like, what village? Like, who's going to buy this expensive? Or what I meant, what they're referring to is the gated communities, which I didn't know in my first month here. And I was like, who will buy this drink? It's so expensive. So I'm always careful when I use the word village. But yes, so going back to the story, so I think I got that exposure and very soon, I, having kind of had the exposure to nonprofits and how, that world works. This was very interesting to see kind of revenue generating businesses that are directly creating impact on the ground, whether it is, impacting farmers or fishermen or other communities. And that kind of was like a really fascinating world. And I think we got really, there was a group of us, that actually joined the organization at the same time. And I think we really kind of were all immediately very passionate about social entrepreneurship. And I think it kind of really molded it's kind of a time in the Indian ecosystem where the ecosystem was starting to take off. So it's a very interesting time to see more and more entrepreneurs. We had some early successes in the tech space, post the kind of IT boom. So this is like, the early 2010s. And that was kind of when, the tech startup ecosystem was also starting to show results. We had created probably a generation of entrepreneurs who came from middle class or lower middle class backgrounds who have become successful or who are building successful businesses, which I think changed the trajectory for people all over the country. So no matter what background you came from, whether you came from a wealthy family or whether you went to a fancy school or not, suddenly entrepreneurship became aspirational. And I think it was kind of, and kind of that trickled down to the impact sector as well.
Of course.
This is kind of my perspective of it. I don't know if this is like the official.
No, but it totally makes sense.
Element. But I think it really made a difference because when you met entrepreneurs who came from, second tier cities or third tier or fourth tier, smaller towns and villages, they also believe that they can start a business and that will change their trajectory. While earlier on, like in many Asian cultures, it's really about getting a government job or later on, like working with a multinational, right? A corporate job. That still, I think, will be the primary, but suddenly there was a generation of people who really wanted to try this. So we kind of getting to experience that at that early part of understanding the sector, I think kind of really, it was kind of really inspiring. And it was really meant that, okay, like all of those things that we learned in commerce, right? Yep. The accounting and the finance.
Apparently it matters.
Business. Kind of started making sense. Though I have to say that, I was kind of only involved post, the investments that Villgro were doing. They primarily worked in like certain sectors, agri-health, in other areas. Now, obviously, Villgro is even 10, 15 years later is even bigger. But then I got the opportunity to start traveling to Southeast Asia because then the boyfriend I had stuck with, who told me to take this job, started traveling to the region for another job. And, so I got to visit him a few times. And he was doing some projects in the Philippines. Okay. And so every time I came, then I started to kind of just inquire about like the entrepreneurship space, especially in the social space. And there was only a handful of people. And then I did, every time I came, I did make sure that I met like whoever was around then.
Okay.
And so kind of got me interested in what's happening in Southeast Asia. It also happened that at the same time, Villgro had kind of just hit like, I think 10 or 15 years. And they were like, okay, how do we take the learnings from India to other ecosystems, that are similar, that are still growing, but maybe can learn from us.
Right.
And I think the founder, Paul Basil, kind of had that commitment that we should help, other developing countries or economies also kind of build this, especially social entrepreneurship type of ecosystem.
Right.
So I started helping out on that kind of, and of course, the plan was literally to kind of help set up in Africa first and then maybe Southeast Asia. But that kind of made me start thinking about these other places where, we could kind of take the lessons, or maybe where it wasn't as evolved as India was evolving too.
Right.
And that got me interested in really seeing like, okay, do all these models actually work in different places? And the answer kind of seemed overwhelmingly yes.
That is amazing. And again, if you look at how India is basically built, if you're able to do it in India, which by the way, it's not just, it's like several countries bunch into one, right? Multiple cultures, very complex problems. There are problems that are homogeneous and there are problems that are heterogeneous. It's heavily nuanced, right? But if you see a template that you can replicate from India into other developing countries, it can work. It's not apples to apples, copy and paste, but there are foundational pieces there that can work. So, for example, in our case, there are several audio tech startups in India called Pocket FM and Cuckoo FM who are doing well. It's like, hey, you know what? They're making a killing. And I was, for the first start of Podcast Network Asia, my startup now, which I've been working on for the past 6 years, we struggle looking for parallels as comparables of what we can do to scale up our business, because we always look in the US. It's like that's one of the worst things that you can capitalize from, because US is a first world country. People behave differently there than here. But if you find a pattern over what you can replicate in India that worked, in Pocket FM just raised Series D, $140 million this last year. Like, hey, you know what? We can replicate that here. And that's what we were able to do here in the Philippines for Serie FM. I'm like, that's what it is. And if you can replicate that same problems, there are things that are almost the same, obviously heavily nuanced. You can't copy paste it, but foundationally, impact, entrepreneurship, and the lack of entrepreneurs that help solve problems are abundant in both countries. But I want to now understand why the Philippines, and why did you choose to stay put here, and how did that 0 to 1 journey in Villgro Philippines begin?
Yeah, sure. So, at the end of, I think 2015, I had kind of decided to move on from, Villgro in India.
Okay.
Multiple reasons. I was kind of doing this exciting stuff of helping replicate with the Villgro model to other parts. But I was also kind of trying to figure out my personal life. And I was kind of sure that, I was trying to work out with my partner, we should move to Southeast Asia. And so then I was like, okay, what am I going to do in Southeast Asia, right? And I had already started helping Paul and the Villgro team, like look at what are the countries in Southeast Asia that we should be looking at. And of course, we had identified Indonesia, Vietnam, and Philippines as like the 3 bigger markets, and with similar kind of problems, and seemingly, where business in some ways already thriving, right? And enough of a market size for business models to work. So those countries were already identified. And I think, they did kind of try sort of Vietnam in the beginning. For whatever reason, it didn't work out. They didn't find the right people and the fit. So I kind of made a personal decision to move. And originally I was planning to move to Singapore, but, it just became so hard with the visas and stuff. And it looked like my partner was just going to continue this project. And it was he went for a few months and then he decided to stay on. So I said, okay, let me go to the Philippines. I kept coming here, and my first trip here, I kind of really, obviously I did all the touristy things and went to all the beautiful beaches. And before I arrived on my trip, I did not know how to swim.
Okay.
But I had seen the photos of the beaches and I was like, oh my God, it's going to be such a shame if I go there and I am so scared of water. Actually, my mother almost drowned when she was very young. So she never let us go near water, even though I live 20 minutes on the beach.
Right.
Yeah. Very close. We've never actually ever swam in the ocean.
Oh, man.
Just like, So I was like, okay, this is something I have to conquer.
Okay.
So in a very cold winter of Delhi, winter time in Delhi,
Okay.
because I was coming here for the Christmas holidays.
Okay.
I learned how to swim because I was like, I'm going to go to that beautiful.
Wow.
And it's a story that I always tell. Like, my coach never came into the water because the water was too cold, so he would teach outside the pool. I will move your arms. Okay. The only time he had to was when I almost like went to the deep end and I almost drowned. So he had to jump in, and he was very upset with me because he was like, you made me jump into the water. So that's my backstory of learning how to swim. I learned the basics. But when I came here, I was just so, first of all, like obviously awestruck by how friendly people were.
Yep.
I met so many people already doing something. There were people doing, there's a group of people who used to meet in Greenbelt around electric vehicles. I don't think many of them are still here. So I kind of met a few people on my trip here. And I think I met Valencia, who was just starting, it was
Earl, who just launched a book. Shout out, Earl.
Yeah, Earl was just setting up Idea Space. I think it was just the first batch. So, he's a friend of my husband. So I kind of got to meet him, and then I was like, okay, something is happening. Okay, like the first incubator is like coming up. And so it seemed like it was kind of exciting. And so kind of all the signs were there. And so I then eventually just decided to make the plunge, both personally and professionally. Personally, I was like, okay, I'm just going to move to this country and see if it works out with this guy. Being in the region. And then secondly, I kind of saw the opportunity. So I did go back and I pitched to Paul Basil, like the founder, to say, okay, I'm going to go and I think I'm going to set up an incubator. And he kind of said, okay, why don't you study the ecosystem for a year and then decide if you want to do it? So I took his advice.
Got it.
So I kind of moved here. And in my first year, that was kind of my focus and really trying to understand the ecosystem better. So I traveled all around the country. I kind of, became a judge to many like startup weekends.
Oh, man.
One of them being a startup weekend in Bukidnon.
Wow. In Balay?
Yeah. And that was the time of like, the Maravi siege and all that. So nobody was actually.
Oh, my God.
There.
Okay. That's scary.
Yeah. But somebody from that team reached out to me and said, like, we are so desperate for like mentors. Nobody's coming. And will you come? So, and then I was like, okay, like, I was thinking to myself, we'll actually go there to meet entrepreneurs otherwise. So I actually did. And I remember it took like a 8-hour drive to go from, Kagendoro to like Bukidnon. And because, of all the checkpoints and the security checkpoints.
Got it.
And stuff, it was very, very long. But but I did. And I think that was the most eye-opening experience for me because the ideas that I heard there were great. But when I looked around the room, I knew that many of them are not going to make it out of maybe this pitch. Because one, like there was just no ecosystem support available, right? These were very young entrepreneurs who were being mentored by like maybe other than me, like other 20-year-olds.
Who have never done it.
Yeah. But the powerful ideas that I heard there were so rooted in the problems that they saw. They really understood the problems well. And the ideas were pretty good. I think one was like a job matching facility. I don't remember exactly what they were, but I was so inspired by the ideas that I heard. And I had also been kind of, I judged a few like in Manila as well. And I thought the quality that I saw actually in Bukidnon was way better. But I knew that they were never probably going to succeed given the support that they might have, right? And the pressure of finding a job. And that's when I kind of got determined that, I'm actually going to do something to help entrepreneurs like those that I had met. So then it was like how to do this. But at the same time, since I had already left Villgro India, I was talking to a friend and we decided to set up a company together. So all this is happening parallelly as entrepreneurial people. So we set up the company called Unlock Impact. And we originally decided that it's going to be like a consulting firm. And we're going to, because we knew social impact, right? So we are going to consult and tell people, where, and CSR funding was kind of changing a trajectory in India. It was going from like the typical, like, plant a tree only or like donate some desks or computers to trying to also put money into entrepreneurship and things like that. Because the government had a very enabling policy in place where they said 2% of, your revenue needs to go into CSR. So it was a mandate for any listed company. So that means that there was suddenly going to be a boom in that CSR money. And we thought we could also be very naive, I think, because we were like, now we know, like we've been doing like in the impact space for so long.
Yep.
It didn't really work out. So we kind of pivoted, and I can share that. But at the same time, I was kind of also exploring this, setting up an incubator focused on the Philippines. And eventually I did make the plunge, but it was really starting with nothing because I didn't know anybody. I had no money. I was, obviously I was financially supported by my partner who could help me with my rent and like the food and stuff. But then, starting on a zero budget and, obviously I had the guidance of Paul Basil, who said, okay, why don't you if you've decided to, he gave a lot of guidance on he's like, put it down, make the case that you actually have based on your research for the 1 year. So I did write a report. And then he said, okay, he's like, see, I don't have any funding to give you either, but I'll help you set this up and, borrow the Villgro name because it might help you fundraise. It didn't help really locally because in Southeast Asia, nobody knew the brand Villgro, but it definitely did help when you're talking to global and, funders and stuff. And, I think when you start your business, you have a lot of imposter syndrome, especially as a person who came to a country who knew nobody here. Nobody knew me. Nobody, I think it's very interesting what you said earlier that not many people are looking at the India story, which was kind of my experience. People didn't know that much about it because I think because of the way, we've not really had that kind of relations between the countries and the exposure. So people didn't really know what it meant to be that I came from Villgro in India or the Indian ecosystem. And
not just that, I'm actually going to take a bit of a tangent here and I'm going to digress, but I totally agree with what you said earlier about, the problem. So I mentor startups too, not just in Manila, but also overseas. And there's a very stark difference, not overseas, regionally in the rural space. And the reason why I do what I do is because, and I'll say it up front, I'm a local guy.
Yeah.
But I've learned how to think, walk, talk, and act like the best of the best that's out here. Because the best of the best startup founders and startups here have a global experience.
Correct.
And they see not just what's in their little pond, but how winners act and execute. Because at the end of the day, that's a game. And they've had experience executing startup. They're former BCG people, overseas, whatever. And they see that, but they know how to zone in on that. And sometimes what's missing, actually not sometimes, majority of the time, what's missing from local startup founders is that perspective and ambition. It starts with that. Understanding the problem from a global perspective. And second, this is what a lot of Filipino startups, even here in Manila, do not understand, that it's okay to actually replicate other startups in emerging countries that are similarly parallel. Because if somebody, and I always call it a comp, if you can find a comparable of your startup trying to solve this problem for X in the Philippines, and you saw that in India, you saw that in Vietnam, you saw that in Indo, there's a high possibility that you can probably get funded because all you need to do is sort of replicate how they did it and execute from a nuanced point of view. But sometimes the local founders are just too enamored by solving a problem locally. There's no problem with that. But if two things are lacking, like your experience in executing a startup, and the good thing about, or the main thing about startups is that it should scale exponentially, then you're solving a problem that's too small, that is not venture fundable, right? Yeah. Very, very few are going to be willing to help you in that journey. You're lucky because they have Villgro, but besides that, it's going to be hard if you do not understand how to scale this up. And the second problem is that you do not have perspective. People don't look outside the borders of the Philippines to replicate it. And that's what a lot of the best founders have here in the Philippines. Understanding, like for example, GoTime. The Time Bank is from South Africa.
Yeah.
In South Africa and the Philippines have very good parallels. Who understood the nuance of how you can actually replicate that? The Gokong ways, because they understand how that works. And that's what a lot of the founders need to be able to understand here, that it's okay to copy ideas and whatnot, because that also gives you conviction from a funder's point of view that, hey, you're trying to do X of Y here. And then you need to understand how you can actually double down. And if you tie that up together, that's how you can actually help build it. Because I've seen pitches. I totally agree with you, Priya. People are like, hey, I'm trying to build the Grab of Bukidnon. Why are you trying to build a Grab for Bukidnon? Yes, that can be a lifestyle business. Great, but the market is too small. And there's nothing wrong with that. But the options for you to scale are few and far between. Now, if that's the vision, fine. But sometimes, what if you can actually be the Grab of the Philippines and Southeast Asia, and you can build a team that can help you scale that? Then there's a lot more people. There's going to be allow you to help. Help you to reach that goal. But the second thing that also is missing is you kind of need to earn your stripes the same way you did it, Priya.
I think I agree with you. And then I disagree on some things. Let me share.
Where do you disagree? I love this. Great
so
discourse.
I do agree with you. I see the same two problems. I think it is, for lack of a better ease of explaining, a lack of imagination of scale.
Okay. Yep.
Which comes from lack of exposure.
Yes.
Right. So that's kind of my thesis around it. So I'm with you 100%.
So that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, to expose that, you can actually do this from a local guy's point of view. Sorry, I forgot to stitch that up together.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yes. So I'm completely with you. I think that is a challenge. And if we do look at, and I think you're very candid and open in saying this, and I think you're absolutely right. Those who have succeeded today in the startup ecosystem come from certain types of backgrounds, right?
Yep.
Either, if not from, obviously, most of us who are in this space are pretty privileged. That's why you're here, because you can take those kind of risks.
But there's anomalies.
But also there is that international exposure, or obviously some financial security that comes from certain wealth that allows you to take, try this, if not this, then that. So I think those two are absolutely true. And that's how I think most ecosystem starts, because that is who can. But there is a second piece, which I think is also a little bit cultural. And until this scenario changes, and this is kind of my assessment after
totally agree. Shoot.
Which is that we don't have, which is what happened and was a game changer in India.
Okay.
That we don't yet have role models who come from outside of these backgrounds. Right?
Yes. Local heroes.
Yeah. And the people who have who exited their business and they put it back to support. Because we are still a young ecosystem. So I think it also could be a symptom of that. But yes, so it's very hard for us to now go to a Bukidnon and then tell that entrepreneur, yes, you can be this international thing, where they don't have anyone who comes from a similar background to look up to. So I think role models are very important, and we have to help create them. And I think for me, now looking back at my own work here in the last 7 years, is that is why building now that we have a certain momentum in the ecosystem, we really have to work on making it more inclusive and kind of helping bring that exposure to entrepreneurs around, because the ideas and the quality of the talent, at least to get started, is definitely there. Execution and scaling up is a whole other thing.
Yep.
But I think, how do we make sure that people have a fair chance of success? But I think it's kind of hard for someone today to imagine that when they haven't seen that. If you haven't gone to an Ivy League school, or if you, haven't had that job abroad, or if you don't come from some, financial security, it's kind of hard to say, no, you take this debt and you take this. Now, are they building fundamentally scalable? I think that's another issue. I think that comes from that exposure also. But where I disagree a little bit with you is, but which I don't blame.
No, and we can disagree. That's why.
Your focus is really startups. I think my focus is kind of, and it has been a learning curve for me as well.
Okay.
I also had this very singular lens of who can scale up and access venture capital. And that would be the success metric. And I think I have shifted away from that, because my sense is that that's not the only thing that's needed.
No, totally agree.
In the Philippines. And so
you can you can build a great sustainable lifestyle business.
Yeah. And I don't even think it's a lifestyle business. I think you can just build a medium or a large size business that's highly profitable.
Correct.
But that may not give you venture type returns, right?
Yes.
And that itself also can create hundreds or even thousands of jobs. Maybe it will not create millions. So I think one shift for us has been, we'll also create space to support those type of business, because we can, because we are inherently very mission driven and not profit driven in that sense. as the incubator. So, but yes, from a startup perspective, if you want to receive venture capital, like if you're not fundamentally building for scale, then that's not the fit for you. And I think that's the the exposure is not there a lot of the time to understand that.
Right. But regardless, the fundamentals, and by the way, I totally agree with you. Sorry if I just made it sound like it's venture.
No.
Venture is the only way.
Right? Yeah.
Because if I put a ratio, again, the reason why I have this take is because I've talked to so many founders and I've seen patterns so much that I'd say only 5% of startups here in the Philippines are venture backable, that are venture VC play. VC play meaning hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars playing, and they're going to be getting a lot of funding. The 95% of businesses or tech-enabled businesses, whatever you want to call yourself, the only path for you is actually to be profitable. And that's okay, right? It doesn't make you less just because you didn't get funding. Actually, it's going to make you more fundamentally sound. If you find a way to become a profitable business, you still have the same impact. And you just are not going to be apples to apples comparable with a VC-funded business where it's go big or go home, right? And if you're in the impact space, you're actually better off becoming a fundamental business that are profitable, because then you can go ride long and have a really measurable impact rather than go big and go home when you're always in this eternal fundraising game in venture. And I last take before we take our last break, I totally agree with the role models, because you're right. Sorry, the 5% that I told you about, I can already tell you where their background. They come from privilege. They come from Manila. They come from overseas, and they had a head start. There's so few that come from a village in Visayas or Mindanao that have a chance. And a lot of those people that actually probably had a chance also broke the curse, the generational curse, and they had international exposure. Perfect example. I always harp on this. Nel Ligo of Peddler. Are you familiar with him? So Nel Ligo is native of Catbalogan, Samar, Eastern Visayas, one of the poorest in the region, right? He's actually headquartered there, educated there, spent college at Cebu, bucked the trend, was able to work for Unilever and P&G globally. After he got sick and tired of that, he created his own startup and went back home. And he's now the biggest taxpayer in Catbalogan City, Samar. Created hundreds and not dozens, hundreds of jobs. But that's a role model we can attest to, because he literally speaks us. He looks like us. We don't come from privilege, and it can be done. But you're right. You need to have role models. But in order for you to kind of buck that generational curse of just going, this is what I'm at, you kind of need to also go overseas first to understand the nuances that, so this is how it's supposed to be, and then come back to solve those local problems. Because until you really see that epiphany, your environment is your own limit.
Yeah, I mean, it's understandable, I think, right? So I think the question is, can everybody do that? So how do we shift and create that equity in our ecosystem?
Right.
If not, everybody's going to have that chance to do that. And I think that's the piece that as ecosystem players, if we really, I think building an ecosystem is a long-term game.
Yes.
And I think we really have to think about how we're going to make it more equitable and inclusive so that there can be more people like that, right? And I think it will change, because in any ecosystem, obviously the people who will start out will be the ones who can take a bit of risk.
Of course.
And, it'll be people from those backgrounds, and hopefully they'll succeed, and then they'll give back. To others. But I think we are probably at the stage where we have to start thinking as an ecosystem, as different players with different hats that we all wear, is that how do we start creating more of these entrepreneurs all around the country? Because that's when we can actually kind of build and make sure, the sort of the economic benefits, and then of course the social climate benefits actually reach more people, because ultimately we want to uplift the country, right? And entrepreneurship is such an important part of us building, an equitable and inclusive.
That actually moves the needle, because the politicians here is not going to be the one that's saving. Right. So that's a hot take. But let's take a last break, and when we come back, we will now talk about the programs of what you guys are actually doing and building here in Villgro, and how we can now be more equitable and be more inclusive over what we can help with in social entrepreneurship, impact entrepreneurship, and more. Let's talk about that more after the break.
Hey hustlers, before we resume the episode, let me tell you a very quick secret. Do you guys ever wonder how we're able to consistently release episode after episode here in Hustleshare without missing a date over the past 3 years? Well, it's not just pure hustle, because I'm also running my podcast along with me running my startup full time. Now, for some of you who have listened to this podcast, you guys very well know that I created a startup that is designed to help the best podcasters in Southeast Asia to realize their full potential, which is called Podcast Network Asia. And over the past couple of years, we've achieved quite a lot in P&A, helping hundreds of podcasters create world-class episodes consistently. However, what we realize is that we are not really solving the real problem of all podcasters in the world if we're not going to productize the thing that we're very good at, which is helping podcasters solve the two main pain points of a podcaster, which is number one, nobody really likes to edit their own show. Especially if you're listening to your own voice. Just like me, I cringe a lot. Having to listen to my voice for 3 to 4 hours just to release a 1-hour episode. It's no fun. And then the other thing is that most podcasters, just like me, are absolutely clueless on how to properly grow their show, which is something that we have perfected in Podcast Network Asia. So we've decided to put this all in one product that helps any podcaster in the world create world-class shows that people will love and will continuously grow. And that's why we created Podmachine. Podmachine is the most affordable podcast subscription service that helps you with your podcasting needs. We've got everything from audio production, crafting designs, and marketing and growth support. So as a podcaster, you can now just focus on the thing that matters the most, creating great content for your listeners. So, if you are an existing podcaster or someone that actually wants to create their podcast now, no need to worry. You got a founder's discount by listening here on Hustleshare. So sign up now at podmachine.com. And aside from the free trial that you're going to get as a new user, I'm throwing in another one free edit as soon as you sign up for just as low as $49.99 USD a month to start creating a consistent and world-class podcast. Again, that's podmachine.com and use the code Hustleshare to get your founder discount. So if you have friends that are podcasters and if you want to have a podcast just like this, y'all know what to do. So just go and talk to you guys in Podmachine.
And we're back in the break. We are still with Priya Thachadi. Then had an interesting deep dive over what we see in the country in terms of entrepreneurship and whatnot. But let's take a step back. Again, we now have established that Villgro is here. But can you again itemize what you guys technically help with in building that ecosystem play? Because again, this is a long game. And I have nothing but respect for ecosystem builders, especially if I see that it's very selfless. Because sometimes also I see, I'm just gonna call it what it is. Again, some guys who try to build ecosystems here, in Manila at least, are just leading people astray, and that's what's sad. Like this is more of an ego boost for you, and you're building an ecosystem where it's the blind leading the blind. And I don't see that with what you guys do, because you guys are very selfless. And man, you're doing the long game, and I really, really appreciate it. But for those people who don't understand till now what you guys do, kindly itemize what does Villgro add into the ecosystem, and what is the ultimate North Star that you guys are trying to build?
All right. I love the candor and your openness.
Man, I want all the smoke. Okay.
I'm like, trying to keep a straight face. But, I do understand where, the startup ecosystem, and I think we've seen this globally, it can be fairly glamorous. And everybody wants to be associated or, in some way part of it, right? Because it kind of is the trendy thing, despite, even if it's going through a slump. So I think for us, you're absolutely right. Like we are probably not as visible in all of these, gatherings that you might see, because the last 5 years honestly has been an insane 5 years since we formally set up. I think 2 years before that I had already kind of started with just me and an intern, and then I had my first team in 2019, because I realized, okay, like we have to, there was enough kind of proof points to kind of get more formal. And so 2018, 2019 is when, I had like 2 employees, and then we kind of formally set up as Villgro. So just to kind of explain, this is still sort of my company, Unlock Impact, and we have several brands under it, all focused. So one of the pieces is only focused on India, which my co-founder Aditi leads, which is called Comms Ninja. I won't talk too much about it, but it's a revenue generating business.
Nice.
That is a communications and marketing agency that focuses on supporting small businesses and social impact organizations. And we work with all women as comms managers. So she kind of runs that part primarily, with me kind of in a support role. And so because it's all kind of happened at the same time, so I had to kind of make sense of doing all of these different things.
Right.
So Villgro Philippines, we have borrowed, or we've licensed, or, we share the name with Villgro India, though we are not officially affiliated legally. But they've been generous to kind of help me use that name. And we follow a similar model. And our goal is, and our mission is, to help create successful, impactful entrepreneurs.
Love it.
We support businesses that have a direct and measurable social, climate, or gender impact. So what do we mean by that? Is that at the core of it, your business should be in addressing a problem that is impacting what we call the bottom of the pyramid, or, the more economically vulnerable. So it could have a product, it could have a service, it could be B2B, B2C, it doesn't matter. But we need to be able to see a direct impact, not indirect, and everybody can claim that they're a social enterprise. By
Net
accident.
zero carbon emission, whatever the hell that claim is.
But we want it to be, that's the reason that you're running your business, right? To create that. And that's
at the core.
Yeah. But it has to be a business model. It has to be revenue generating, and you need to have a path to profitability.
Yeah.
And as much as possible, a path to scale. Though now we are making space to even support, community-based organizations that may never scale up, but can be profitable.
Got it.
What we do is that we work at the very early stages. But you need to at least have operated for 6 months, because we are not a very typical incubator accelerator, which is about just kind of loose kind of mentoring connections. It's a very, very hands-on support, which means
you roll up your sleeves.
Yeah, we roll up our sleeves. Our mission, the way that we see it, at the core, which is our incubation work, is through programs, like you said. But we focus on different themes. So it could be clean energy, circularity, looking at climate health, femtech. And we try to get, we do select a group of entrepreneurs who we believe meet that mandate. And then we provide typically some grant funding to absorb some risk in the business.
Nice.
Because we want you to test the model.
Right.
And do some pilots to kind of build your early traction. Or if you already have some early traction, then do some experiments to kind of prepare for scale or prepare for profitability, right? So there's a bit of funding, but the core really is that we match you with very specific mentors. We spent a lot of time in actually finding the right people. Mentors are usually from all around the world. Primarily from other developing countries where, they've either built these businesses or they come from that industry.
They're role models, technically.
Yeah, role models. And then also technical assistance around accounting and finance, which most founders, don't like. If you're going to scale up.
Right.
And also things like, branding, legal. So but we really do work on helping fix the books and fix the books in the right way, because mostly it's quite messy and things. And you need all of your paperwork lined up if you want to, get capital. So that's really the focus. And typically our programs are, 6 months to 12 to even 24 months, because especially when you're blending business and impact, it takes much longer to get a product market fit because you're trying to kind of keep your mission intact. Very soon, what we find is that the problem solution fit happens quite fast because they've started with that, but product market fit takes time, which means you have to absorb the risk. You need risk capital. You need, support, which you may not have, because many of the entrepreneurs don't come already with those networks that they need to actually scale. So that's the role that we see as a catalyst. But the incubation is one pillar because we have a very ecosystem approach. So we also have a pillar called inspiration, where we really want to convene the community, make the connections, so we do several events through the year. We do a lot of them in collaboration with other incubators that are doing similar work. So we can bring our communities together. We do thematic, something called Talk Impact, where it's like, deep diving into a particular topic and bringing stakeholders around that. We do some venture competitions where we don't see a lot of enterprises easily visible. So then we might do something around that. For example, we also go into thematic areas. So we're quite thematic focused. When I started, we were sector agnostic because, there weren't that many models and entrepreneurs to find. But over the last 7 years, we've seen that, we can afford to focus on certain sectors. And so we are kind of trying to be ahead of the curve to see where do we see. So 5 years ago, we saw that there weren't that many people in plastics. And so we started, with venture competition, helping people create ideas. 4 years later, we can do full-fledged accelerator programs. We are already, since last year, working on nature-based solutions, which again is quite new. We worked on sexual reproductive health maybe 4 years ago. And then we've been supporting femtextiles even before all of these things became trends. So I think we are quite future looking, but really looking at the issues in the ecosystem, in the economy, right? Women's health, hugely underfunded, unresearched. Plastic was not so sexy then. It's sexier now.
Right.
More people, working on nature-based solutions, which are typically seen as very small and community-based and not very successful. So we're already kind of playing there. So we really want to be there to kind of bring the resources that an entrepreneur really needs to really do their job, to run the business. And the inspiration pillar is really bringing people together. Most recently, we've added the investment arm, where we also do make some small direct investments, but we've actually built a network called Impact Pioneers Network in partnership with another impact incubator and investor called Exchange, where we're bringing together those who want to invest into impact businesses. And we have about 20 plus investors who are interested, mostly local, but some are also regional or global. And we are trying to sort of build that pool of risk capital because, like you said, not everybody can raise venture capital. So what happens, right? Or maybe you're not yet ready, but you still need capital to grow a business.
Correct.
So that's the answer, that
love it.
Trying to sort of give, which is really address the missing middle. So that's really the core of our work: the inspiration, incubation, and investment.
That's amazing, and I like the lens that you guys put in, because now you have very much a very defined type of set of entrepreneurs and the type of projects that you like to support. But a couple of stupid questions. So since on one hand, this is a grant. So if it's a grant, it's equity free, or is it
equity free?
Love it. Wow. Okay. So man, that's a love language that you don't see, because if it's a grant, like what I said, a lot of people will invest, but of course that comes with a price of you giving a portion of your business to that. So man, that's rare that you actually give grants, because the only people that I see now in the ecosystem that does that is literally the government. But there's only a few checks that they can support, and obviously it comes from a lens of, say, DOST coming in from a prototype type of thing. There's SG in a sort of venture fund in the ICT, and then DTI. Then again, it's great, but only a few startups can actually tap into that. But now, since a grant, it comes from you guys, and that's equity free. But I want to understand now and do a bit of deeper dive. What type of entrepreneurs do you guys look for if they want to really be part of the Villgro ecosystem?
Yeah. So I think more recently we have been quite thematic focused.
Okay.
So currently for this year, we are really very deep into sort of the climate space. So we currently are looking at, we've just kind of started a program that is focused on circular economy. So business models that, are kind of, embedding circularity in their business model. So that program is launched.
We have some winners here that are kind of thriving into that. So shout out to my friends like Humble, right? It's possible that you can actually do things like that. And it's not a zero-sum market. It's a big problem.
Yeah, it's a huge issue, I think. And every business, needs to embed circularity. But these are people who are developing specific solutions. We've just closed applications and just launched another program which focuses on the nexus of climate and health. So looking, anywhere from the agri-food system all the way, disaster and, how you can kind of manage that. So kind of a broad spectrum. So again, I think more and more when we look at industries and sectors, we do see there's a lot of intersectionality, can't box things, but so that's kind of another area, climate, gender, and health.
Okay.
And we have a new program that will be launching very soon that's focused on clean tech and supporting. So clean tech typically is one sector that has already kind of scaled up quite a bit at the infrastructure level. But we are really looking at with a lot more opportunity for small businesses to transition to using clean energy to bring down their cost and, of course, help the environment. So that's a new program that's coming up.
Got it.
So these are some of the ones that are currently open. And then our very exciting work that we are continuing this year, based on some work that we did last year, is really focusing on nature-based enterprises. So this would be more rural or community-focused enterprises. That is kind of a new vertical for us because we've also typically been working, with startups or businesses, but now really focusing on community-based solutions that are inherently got biodiversity or conservation at the heart of it, but business model. So it'll be kind of a learning curve both for the people who are running those solutions and us to kind of convert these into proper sustainable businesses. So these are our focus areas for this year. But broadly, if I were to say that, we are working in climate, health, and gender. And, and sometimes they all intersect. So within climate, we're looking at plastic, circularity, waste, affordable housing, because housing is going to be a huge issue for us, as well as nature-based. Within health, we are currently focused only on maternal and sexual reproductive health. Next year, we hope to kind of look at more affordable healthcare specifically. And of course, gender is cutting across all of this. We have a very explicit gender lens coming to kind of, our theme that we want to talk about. So I would say that I was very fortunate, Ron, that, I grew up in all women family. Yes. And, I went to all-girls school. I went to an all-girls college. So, maybe my exposure to men has been limited growing up, but I was quite protected.
Yeah.
So actually, I never kind of really thought about the problems of women or trying to solve it in a very specific, because they were kind of, I was always surrounded and I didn't, I was always quite protected. So I didn't experience a lot of things until I went to the real world. And then, you kind of face a lot of the issues and that kind of, so I never kind of had any guidance to think that, okay, I should do something specifically apart in my personal life, but then I started kind of learning about gender lens investing. I was very fortunate to be part of a group in Southeast Asia, and some funders who were really building a pool of leaders around gender lens. And I got to be part of that, which really kind of upskilled. And I unlearned a lot of things. I realized my own biases sometimes, I realized that I was quite tougher on women because I had much higher expectations of them to do better. Right. So these are things that I unlearned myself. And so then I realized, how do I bring that to my work? And so about 4 years ago, Villgro Philippines adopted a formal gender smart policy. We set some goals, all of which we've achieved. So now we have to set new goals. And it's okay, how do you as an organization become gender smart and how do we support women? So when you go to a typical startup event, you don't really see a lot of women there, right?
Yeah.
Because also maybe the timing, when the events are happening and things like that, of course, it's changing.
Yep.
But when we look at capital, of who's receiving capital, not only in venture capital, of course, venture capital, we know the numbers are it's 2% globally and about 8% in Southeast Asia. But, when we look at other forms of capital as well, despite there being a lot of products for women and, microfinance primarily funds women, what happens beyond microfinance, suddenly like women are somehow seen as the risky again. So that's the kind of, piece that I've kind of been understanding. And we started working a lot more because, I think because of the kind of organization we are and the culture that we have, we attract a lot of women in our team, not only women, people of all genders. We also, a lot of people who apply to our programs, women. So we kind of started with one program specifically for women entrepreneurs, and then it kind of has gone on from there. Now our goal is kind of, to expand that. So every program that we have, or if you come to any Villgro event, you'll never see a group that's not diverse. So we'll have, mix of genders on the panel, in the audience. And this is because we've been very intentional about it. You'll never see like a panel. Maybe you'll see all women sometimes. Even then, we feel bad about that. And then you'll never see like all men on a panel because we want different voices. Because if we are not talking to half the population, or if you're not providing products and services to half the population, you're missing out from a business perspective. I'm sure like, you might see this when you actually talk to a lot of early stage entrepreneurs and you ask, okay, like who are your customers? Have you looked at the data? What's the gender disaggregated data? Many people don't actually have it.
Yep.
It's kind of shocking, right? If you want to be able to sell a product and you want to expand your market, we need to really understand who it's for. And in many cases, especially in retail and consumer markets, women are making the decision. So there is a very strong business case to apply that gender lens. And so that's what we realized. And so we've created a lot of spaces. And that led me to launch the New Shoe Network, which about maybe like 3 years ago or 4 years ago now. It's kind of started in the pandemic, quite informally, getting a group of women together and talking and learning together. And so my co-founder Aditi and I decided to make it formal. And we were doing like a separate group in the Philippines, a separate group in India. And, it was all getting a bit too much for us, entrepreneurs, like how many problems to be solved separately. So we actually have a regional community called the New Shoe Network. We have, over 800 women entrepreneurs who are formally part of it, thousands more, we've touched over these years. And we really came together because we found that, women are quite shy when it comes to kind of asking kind of for help. It's kind of surprising how much we talk. We talk a lot. But as entrepreneurs, seeking kind of that help, tapping your network, kind of reaching out when you're really struggling. Entrepreneurship is very, very lonely, as you know. And we have so many ups and downs. Like, today will be a great day, tomorrow can be a terrible day. And you do need that support system. But more importantly, you need networks and you need access to information. And in the startup space, information is really kind of restricted, right? Like who you know and who you know knows about that opportunity makes a huge difference, because you may there might be a great product out there targeting women, but you may never find out about it unless some other woman entrepreneur or another entrepreneur, anybody in your network, works like that for any network, right? With the gender. And sometimes we found that women entrepreneurs, especially, were not in a lot of these rooms where this information is being shared. And so we kind of set out on the mission to unlock capital for women, but by bringing together a community. So that's one. But the other piece, as entrepreneurs, you and I know that the skills that we have when we start our business is not enough as you continue to grow your business.
It's a team sport.
Yeah. And we have to upskill ourselves. And a lot of the time as entrepreneurs, we don't have the time to do that. Like, when are you going to sit and like read the book and like take a course and stuff? It's very difficult. Have you finished any of the courses you started? Like I really haven't. I have so many unfinished. So I think that's why we felt like we really wanted to bring together a community that also focuses on leadership skills. So we have a self-paced curriculum that people can take. And, we do programs around leadership building alongside capital.
All right. Last two questions before I let you go. You guys have done a lot of work here, but tell me about your best of the best incubatees and what are they up to and what are you most proud of about their journeys?
Wow. That's a tough one because I can't kind of call out the best of the best, but let me share some examples.
Okay.
We have, so just to kind of let you know, as Villgro Philippines, even though Philippines is in our name, 60% of our work is here in the Philippines and 40% is regional. So and someday when we have the time, like we will be kind of transitioning into a regional
Villgro Southeast Asia. Let's just say.
Yeah, or maybe another name. I don't know. So the main thing is that our focus really has been to support those who are creating impact on the ground. So let me give you an example. I'm very excited about an entrepreneur called CT, who's based out of Mindanao. She lives outside Abu Dhabi, and she started a mushroom business. She's an internally displaced person, and she was really trying to kind of create an income for the community that she's in. And she started a mushroom business. So she grows fresh mushrooms and she has a mushroom house.
We're recording this right around lunch, by the way. So thank you for making me hungry.
So Ikram Mushroom is a business that is really trying to kind of provide, and grow fresh mushroom. But she started because she just wanted to engage the young people in her community and give them a job so that they don't go back into conflict, right? Because when you de-escalate conflict, you need to be able to create jobs. People need to have an income so that, they don't fall into crime or anything else. And that's exactly what she had in mind. So she's still very small, but I love her spirit. And she keeps inspiring me every time I meet her. So that's it's a business that I think has a lot of potential. But of course, right now she's just selling into the stores that are around her in her local community because she doesn't have an FDA facility yet to sell into formal supermarkets. These are, again, like the issues that a lot of small businesses face. They don't have the capital to invest into an FDA facility and so on and so forth. And then it's a domino effect. Then you kind of get stuck and stagnate.
Yeah.
I do hope that, she's able to kind of overcome that soon.
Right.
Another company that, for example, in Indonesia that we support is called Sampangan. And Faisal, the founder there came up with a really innovative way to kind of recycle and manage waste. And they have big machines that a little magic box that they have built that they use in landfills. And now they are able to kind of, like you said, replicate that. They also even have clients in like Brazil and things like that.
Right.
Very excited about a few circular economy businesses that we are seeing quite early, but we are seeing people manage waste, doing really very interesting upcycled products. And, we'll share soon about, who are the entrepreneurs in our circular economy program. But I'm very excited by some of the models that we are seeing there. A company to look out for is, Billion Bricks.
Billion Bricks.
Yeah. They are changing the affordable housing market. It's been a tough journey for them because, it's hard to find developers who want to sell to lower income customers. But they've built a beautiful low income home, which is not like, when you think about a low income housing, it's not the image that you'll have. Do check them out. But they've integrated a solar roof. So it is net zero home.
Wow.
That is very affordable. And any excess energy that is being produced by the home,
sell it to the grid.
So it's still quite early in the sense of they're still kind of building their first, they've just started their first development outside of Metro Manila, a second one in Mindanao. But again, it's kind of breaking the stereotype of what you think of low-cost housing. And somehow we want people to be aspirational, especially the poor, but not that aspirational, right? And I think that's what is different about social entrepreneurs is that they're not thinking about the poor or vulnerable communities as just beneficiaries, like that we should all become benefactors of them. They are trying to make them equal partners and, customers who have aspirations to buy quality products and services. And I think that's the power. And that's how we will build an equitable and inclusive economy.
That's amazing. All right. Last question before I let you go. Of course, we have a zero in. And again, this is almost themed for women entrepreneurs. And again, let's just call it what it is. Again, the candor in calling it out, right? There's still a massive imbalance towards the startup bros. And by the way, the startup bros are not here to fucking gatekeep you guys. We just need more sisters in the startup ecosystem. But for those people who are for our women entrepreneurs, what's your advice for them to stand out and capitalize more in this growing trend that of women entrepreneurship, because there's a lot of you guys that are coming out now, but it's still not enough for it to be in a ratio where where in a startup ecosystem, when I see say 1:1 ratio of startup broskies and startup sisters in the ecosystem. What would be your advice for women entrepreneurs to be more included and be more heard and create more impact in the ecosystem?
Yeah. So I think they exist. Majority of the businesses in this country are, especially in the smaller business space, are women-owned or women-led. But when we come to the startup space, I think, of course, there is a lot of women have told me, like, when they walk into like a startup event, like there's hardly like a few, so they're kind of uncomfortable. They kind of leave quite early, right? So I think my biggest advice would be that define success on your own terms. There's a lot of glamour, and there is, unfortunately, a certain storyline of what success looks like in the startup space. And today that is primarily, raising venture capital or being visible in all these kind of places. The only thing that matters is how you're going to execute a business, and because all this other stuff will fall off. The problem that we have today is that women entrepreneurs are not getting access to the resources that they need to grow their business, whether it's money, whether it's the networks. So that is the imbalance that we got to. The rest of it is a bit of noise, which eventually will tell its own story if the business will succeed or not, right? So I wouldn't, so my suggestion would be don't be intimidated by all that noise. Really figure out what is it that you want to do. Do you want to build a legacy business? Do you want to build a unicorn? Do you want to build, legacy business? What I mean is you want to leave it to your next generation, or you want to build a profitable business that you want to sell at some point.
Right.
And any of these paths are totally okay. And you can be successful in any of this. So I think it's about, kind of just figuring out. It might take us a little while to identify which of these paths might be the success for us, and kind of then figure out who can really help you. And I would say to all the women, there is support out there, but sometimes it's difficult for us to find each other or or ask for this help. Please do ask.
Yes.
And don't be afraid of capital. Not accessing capital might be keeping you from the potential that's right in front of you. So you might have an order that you're not able to kind of fulfill because you're not taking, all you need is working capital. You don't need venture capital, or you don't need an investor for that, right? Or the idea of the investor that you might have.
Right.
You just need a short-term working capital loan to be able to do that. So just spend a bit of time to understand the different forms of capital. Venture capital might be for you or maybe not. But if you need something else, I think, you need to kind of slowly start to build a community around you that can give you this information, right? And, and there are several spaces. We've built a space, a safe space at Newshoe to do that. And I would say that, it sometimes might take you some time to find your voice, but you have a voice that is worth being heard in the world. So in your own way, whether you want to be out there on social media, or you want to be speaking at events, or maybe just influencing your own community, find that voice, and you are totally worth it. And your story, whatever it might be, is. So sometimes we have to just break out of the boxes that we've built for ourselves. And sometimes we need somebody else to help us get out of that. So we have to kind of find a way. Find and define whatever success is for you, and that works for you. And I think that itself will make you feel like, you're owning a story.
That is amazing. Thank you so much, Priya, for such an amazing episode. But before I let you go, if people want to work with you or join Villgro Philippines, where do they go and how do they do that?
Yeah, so please find us on social media. We are on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. Just look for Villgro Philippines. And if you're a woman entrepreneur, look for Newshoe Network, NUSHU. You'll again find us on social media. Drop us a line or just sign up. And we have events every month, online and offline. And there is a community and a safe space waiting for you.
That is amazing, Priya. But before I let you go, follow us whenever podcast app you're listening to, whether Spotify, Apple Podcast, or whatever you listen to podcasts. And if you see a rating there, give us a rating. Let us know what you think, so at least we can improve our content. We've been doing it for the past 6 years, and we are not going to stop. We're going to get a lot more entrepreneurs for you. But if we did say some jargon, it's going to be in the show notes on hustleshare.com. If you also want to support Hustleshare and doing content like this, please do subscribe at premium.hustleshare.com. Again, Priya, thank you very much.